G'day guys and welcome to the Centre Bounce, where today we are joined by a very special guest to talk about the West Coast Eagles. Stay tuned. Big J, this guy on my left, had to sort of orient myself looking at the screen here. The guy on my left, Jesse, he does not need much of an introduction, but we're going to give him one. You've done a great job getting this guy onto the channel, so I will let you do that for us today.
Guys, today we're joined by Jesse from, I guess, True Footy and now True Eagle. One of those creators, like when we had DR on, I spoke about it. When we've had Shorty, I've spoken about it. But one of those guys that kind of was that inspiration for me to make YouTube videos. It's like, cool, get him on, talk about AFL. And now we've got him on our channel talking AFL. How you doing, Jesse?
Very well. Thank you, gentlemen. That was a lovely introduction. I'm touched. But yeah, very excited to chat about the Eagles. It's not a topic that inspires a lot of joy right now, but I still love talking about my boys and yeah, happy to be here.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, seriously, they're your boys. If you don't love your boys, who the hell will? Come on. I mean, if you want to talk about them, you can talk about them glowingly, negatively. Don't you worry. As a Bomber man myself, I have spoken very negatively about my own boys many times, but it's because we love them so much that we can't help but talk about them. And it's been great. You know, you obviously came on when we were on Fancast as well during the season last year, which was awesome as well. You got to see us sing some Country Roads as well, which I think to that day was my favorite episode filming on that day. So I was absolutely pinching myself that you came on. But now we get to have a talk with you about your love for the Eagles specifically today. How did you come to love the Eagles, man?
Having grown up a little bit overseas, my dad worked as an architect in Thailand. The first 8 years of my life, I didn't know what footy was. When we moved back to Perth, so my parents were from Perth, and we just I inherited the West Coast Eagles as my club, which I feel very lucky about. If Dad had been from the Fremantle area, who knows what my footy love would be like. Inherited the West Coast Eagles, and I don't know exactly. I think as a kid, my favorite sport was cricket, and that was the sport I played. And footy was a little bit more the winter sport. And then somewhere along the line, I think it was around the time the Eagles really capitulated in like that 08 to 10 period. I started learning about the draft, and once I started to learn about these players quite like intimately and getting really invested, I sort of learned how the AFL cycles and rebuilding this club. I think that is ultimately where I started to really love the Eagles as a team and a club, and it was all about getting to that next premiership, which thankfully did come 10 years later. The love has only intensified, and now I'm sort of doing this as a career, if you want to call it that. And so, the love's only intensified as time's gone on.
Yeah, it's a bit weird because obviously Joe and I are in Victoria and we can kind of see all the rivalries and things like that in Victoria, but similar to maybe a Queensland a little bit, but definitely a South Australia. Is there a lot of Freo versus West Coast rivalry in West Coast, or is it kind of like, cool, we're not that good, but Victorians are just better?
Yeah. You mean between Fremantle and West Coast?
Yeah, like the fans? Because you're saying,
there is.
You don't want to be a Freo fan, you'd rather be a West Coast fan. Is that kind of how it feels across the board?
There's definitely some heat, absolutely. One thing that kind of works against it, though, is that for the last decade, for the most part, the teams have swung so wildly on opposite sides of the ladder. So the contests haven't been that great. Generally, the higher ranked team has won convincingly. And it's kind of just been the other team waiting for the other team to suck and vice versa constantly. But there has been a few years where I remember the first year Fremantle made the finals. That was in 2003. And they beat us late in the season to qualify for finals for the first time. And that was gut-wrenching because we were also in the finals mix. And so there are clashes that were really meaningful to the context of the season historically. They did happen. But for the most part, my memory is like when we were good, Fremantle were irrelevant, and now the tide has turned. And one day, hopefully we'll play in a game that really means something, but it feels like a long way away at the moment.
Oh, I'd imagine poor young Druzy would be pulling his absolute hair out in a situation like that with you guys going head to head. Honestly, I've loved watching your videos together, and you guys would be sitting there, opposite sides. Obviously you're a West Coast, he's a Freo, but it just doesn't. I don't know. It feels a bit different to the derby, the showdown. Sorry, you guys have the derby. Adult South Australia have the showdown. It feels different. It honestly feels like there is genuine hatred between Adelaide and Port Adelaide. I don't personally get that vibe. Obviously, you guys are rivals over there out west, but I just don't feel like there's that reciprocal hatred that we see in the South Australia.
Well, I think if you're looking at it, if I'm part of your reference point, I personally always try and be relatively respectful, particularly on camera. And I've got some of my best mates that are Fremantle fans, and we just kind of like to talk footy, and that's kind of part of my brand. So there's an element where I won't, tell Fremantle how much I hate them on camera, and I don't really hate them. I've had to park that to do true footy, or I've tried to do that. Druzy outwardly hates West Coast, and there are plenty of fans like that. But I think the showdown hatred is kind of like their rivalry is just a bit stronger. Like last year, Port finished higher, and Adelaide won both showdowns. Like there's much better contests. There's a lot more heat. Sometimes when you're the weaker WA side, you just kind of endure derbies. You don't really look forward to them. So I think that's how I diagnose it.
Fair enough. I mean, that's why you made True Eagle, right? So you can get all like your hatred for Fremantle out on camera and be like, I hate you guys so much.
That's right. I can say what I want on True Eagle. It's fine.
Yeah. You can say whatever you want here as well. Don't hold back. If you wanna drill Justin Longmuir and say, you're gonna get sacked, mate, you can say whatever you want here. There's no qualms whatsoever. Brayshaw, you're stuck on a wing, you suck, mate. Whatever you want to say, you can absolutely say that here. No one's gonna come with pitchforks, that's for sure. But I suppose, yeah, maybe put it into a short, but we are talking about you Eagles, and it's because you obviously love them very, very much. And so with that, and sort of as you mentioned, you just got to endure it. And unfortunately, last year, you had a lot to endure. We won't speak about it too much because obviously everyone and their mother and their stepsister's dog have spoken about the Eagles till tomorrow comes and what happened last year. You finished 18th with a very poor percentage. You'd had the 3 wins. We normally type in the big wins of note for every team when we did it. But in this case, we just had to discuss the wins as they were. Very nearly added my Bombers to this list. You really should have beaten us, dare I say it. That was a horrific game by us. You really should have beat us that day. I think you guys threw in the towel because you knew you might have lost Harley Reid if you won.
Yeah, I remember that, watching that in London in bed. I didn't mean to wake up for that game, but I woke up and I was like, oh, there's an Eagles game. And I watched the last quarter. I feel like there was some sort of, it might not have been an umpiring call, but I think there was something weird where we didn't do anything defensively after we kicked that last goal to hit the front, and then Essendon scored. The thing that works against that is we did go out and roll the Bulldogs 2 weeks later. So I don't really buy into the fact that we probably tried to lose it, but weird game and still a happy memory even though we lost. But that just speaks to how bad last year was.
At least you didn't have any dodgy interchanges to be like, cool, we need to they're not winning bet enough. We've got to do an interchange, kind of messing things up.
Yes.
One of the things I found with the Eagles last year is obviously you had a few monster losses. I'm talking, Stuff versus Freo. Let's not talk about the Sydney game too much. But you really had some competitive games as well. And I know that on your channel, you've talked about when the older players are fit and firing, you're competitive, right? But when you focus on the young guys too much, when maybe the older guys having a bad week, it's not so good. Was that kind of a thing that happened with the team last year?
I think last year was a bit of a mix of every single factor, to be honest. I think if we're trying to diagnose how things got really bad, the only thing I think you can explain a 30-goal loss that was utterly pathetic is, I think, it's psychological. And I think over time, the players who, are not that bad, even the one when we might have been injury depleted, we might have had some fitness issues, but they're not that bad to lose a game by 30 goals. It's completely inexplicable. But I think over time, and especially because this has happened over a 2-year period, these players, they probably start a game, concede the first 4 goals and think, okay, here we go again. And I think the psychological impact on players is they don't believe they're going to win, and they don't believe they're going to get rewarded for making that chase or running back to cover space and making that intercepts. And I think that does have that 5% drop in mentality has a big impact. And I think we saw that over the course of the season. And that would explain as well why in certain pockets we came out and played really well. Like the fact that we beat the Bulldogs and we're, in control of that game for most of it, kind of speaks to that. I think that was a week after we lost the Derby by 100 points. So I think a lot of it is mentality, and it's been worn down over time because we've just been non-competitive and the players don't have belief. So that's the number one thing we need to rectify this year.
Yeah, and you didn't even have to hire David Noble either. So, you could be right.
So much of this game, as is life in general, a lot of it is between the ears. And if you go into anything with confidence, then all of a sudden you can sort of look at the glass half full and really work on things to improve. But I've made this joke a few times. Like there's something in the water at West Coast which causes your players to just get injured so readily, and it's almost like this in particular the last 2 seasons. It's like this one's gone down, oh, another one's gone down, and it's like all of these random injuries that take place in the preseason to your best players, to your experienced players, to guns. And I can't help but obviously we're a SUPERCOACH channel primarily here, in addition to football content in general as well. But like players like Elliot Yeo, for example, who really have been great, options in terms of the output that he can give and the role that he plays, whether it's on the ball or off halfback. These really senior experienced leaders just going down all the time with injury, causing you to go really young, really quickly, a lot of responsibility placed on their shoulders. It's just like, geez, like, is it just really unlucky, or is there any potential off-field changes that can be made to sort of try and keep the list healthier? What's your take on that?
Again, it's an unsexy answer, but my belief that it's kind of a little bit of everything. So there is a bit of luck. And I actually did a video on it a couple of days ago on True Eagle, listing all the freak injuries that happened to West Coast, like Liam Ryan landing on his head and it tore his hamstring off the bone. Tom Barras cracks his back by falling on his back. Matthew Flynn jumped into a bag the other day and his hamstring detached at the knee. And Harry Edwards was walking off the field at training. Somebody kicked the ball to him. He spoiled it and he fractured his wrist and was out for 6 weeks. Fractured larynx, broken ankles. Anyway, you get my point. So there's a bit of that. And then there is also a lot of repeat hamstring injuries we're seeing. And I think, and then there's also the factor of age and, Shuey's body, Yo's body. There's all these different factors here. We have made the changes in terms of strength and conditioning. We've made those changes. There's a school of thought that suggests it's going to take time for those changes to come into effect. So for us to expect that to be rectified straight away is probably unrealistic. But it is also kind of weird that Matthew Flynn has just come from another club where, he's done years under their program and is barely been at the club. He's been at the club for 2 months and then does a ridiculous injury like that. So I don't know what to do to diagnose it. Changes needed to be made. Changes have been made. Reviews are underway. But there does seem to be some freaky bad juju out there. It's a bit of everything. And I wish I had one straight answer for you, but I think it is a little bit of a blend of multiple factors.
Yeah, I guess kind of if it was one straight answer, you guys would have fixed it and, these things probably wouldn't have happened. So
yeah,
someone kicked a mirror or punched a ladder or something, and then, everything's changed. And yeah, hopefully it gets fixed up for you over the preseason. I know you've had a couple of injuries so far already.
It's Druzy and the Freo boys. It's Druzy and they're all got their Ouija board, or they got their voodoo doll or something. They want to see the demise of West Coast, and they want to see themselves win a flag, because obviously, as we all know, Freo still, that cabinet is just collecting dust. So obviously, and the Eagles have been, if not among the best or the best when it comes to the rebuild and the quick bounce back. They've been absolutely top notch in that respect. And I think a lot of it has got to come down to the way that they acquire their players. They go and they do really good on the trade table very well as picking up some incredible players. Obviously, we don't have to talk about all of the players drafted by the Eagles, but I guess we'll talk about the trade period, start things off. Matt Flynn, as you as you mentioned, unfortunately, with that freak accident. So it opens up the door. BJ Williams will continue to be the primary ruck, and then whoever is going to help him out, maybe someone that we're going to talk about on the next page, perhaps. But you added Tyler Brockman to your side over the preseason. Were you happy with that selection? Do you reckon that's a good one?
Yeah, look, I'll be completely honest. Normally, I researched a lot of these Eagles recruits. Brockman was a bit of a blind spot for me, but what I think I did notice was how many Hawks fans were absolutely gutted to lose him. What I think he brings to us is, quite a busy forward half, skillful pressure player, and he can sort of roll on ball and make an impact at clearances. So I'm optimistic about that. He's in the right age profile for us. I like all of that. Again, I think he was held out of the last game due to injury, but I believe he's back next week. But I think the two things that I like about this, both of these recruits in conjunction, is just the fact that they fill this age. Like, there's a massive chasm in our list. We've got great, veterans who have been great. We've had some draft picks, and we've got nothing in the middle. Save for like Oscar Allen, Liam Duggan. There's a few, but we're not talking guys who are genuinely outside of Allen going to move the needle. So going forward, yes, it's good to get our draft picks in, but to get some of these guys who are between 21 and 25 onto the list makes it a little bit easier to foresee how we might stop being rubbish earlier than we otherwise would, if that makes sense.
I guess kind of how it was with North Melbourne in 2021 and 2022, kind of having that number one draft pick and not trading it. I was really surprised that Eagles this year, given the demographic of the team. Obviously, we'll talk about Harley Reid next, but so much pressure from Victorian clubs, other clubs, your own club. Hey, let's get rid of the pick. We can now get 5 round one draft picks, monster hauls, that kind of thing. Like, you guys stood firm and was just like, hey, no, we're going to take the player. Did you think that coming into the trade period that having number one draft pick, you were going to swap it out for some players or swap it out for some extra draft picks this year?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to lie. As an Eagles fan, my mind changed about 50 times about what I thought was going to happen, what I wanted to happen. I'm just an emotional fan. But yeah, absolutely, I consider that possibility. I probably would have guessed prior to the trade period there was a good chance we were going to move the pick on. But the thing is, one thing that sort of got lost in all of these talks about whether West Coast should trade the pick one is we didn't have access to what was being offered. So I think North offered 3, not 2. This is what Rowan O'Brien said, but I don't know what to believe. But I think North offered pick 3, 17, and a future priority pick. Is that right?
Yeah, I think something like that. And then it turned out to be like pick 3, and then maybe 2 of our picks in the teams from this year. And that was kind of the we weren't going to give you 4 first round picks, but that's kind of seemed what it was like. So we'd end up with like pick 1 and 2. Yeah,
absolutely. So I think, it's always helpful to have specifics when we talk about where the West Coast should have done it. And 3 might have got us Curtin in hindsight, and then maybe 2 other North boys in Hardiman and Goad or something like that. So I'm pretty comfortable we went the way we did. And then one thing I do like about it is that it didn't show conservatism. It didn't show weakness. Like, the Eagles obviously fancy themselves as a big, powerful club. And what would a big, powerful club do in this situation? If Collingwood had pick 1 as an example, they'd take Harley Reid every day of the week. I get your point absolutely about list breakdown. That's ultimately the difference. Like, our list position would suggest we probably need more picks, but I think there's an argument to suggest go for the best kid and then figure out the rest later. And those pieces can be, there's no real reason we need to rush the rebuild as long as we get it right.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And if you look at a lot of your delisted players there are some people that was taken through the WA state leagues. And obviously that's a big outlet that I think a lot of Victorian clubs don't have. Obviously, we're in Victoria and you're in WA, but just kind of having the amount of talent through there and people that are happy to go home and play for their kind of home state team as well. Similar to yourself, right? Like, imagine if you had been drafted and then you've got a chance to go play for West Coast and that was your childhood team. Like, being able to do that is obviously a huge draw card for people to come back home.
Yeah, it's a nice advantage being in. Well, I say advantage, but like it's a nice perk of having a 2-team town. And one thing is, like, West Coast and Fremantle, they always seem to separate their targets. There's been a few exceptions where both clubs have chased the same player, but for the most part, we kind of just hear them linked to one club and then it sort of gets done. So comparatively, though, WA hasn't really been producing the same amount of talent as I maybe thought they once did. A lot of the best talent is Victorian at the moment. South Australia had a good year a couple of years ago, but it's good to have that that luring home advantage, so to speak. But again, we kind of diminish it if we're rubbish, you know. I'm sure, you know, Devin Robertson, I think his situation was quite complicated with his girlfriend, but you know, it's a hard sell at the moment. Come play for the Eagles. We're going to be better, you know.
I guess depends on how much money you're going to end up throwing at Tim English this year. You're like, hey, come back. We've got the cash.
Yeah, I would imagine we have a crack.
Because I was thinking, like, my God, I felt like Luke Jackson would have been a much better fit for you guys, given his age bracket, that he's young. You know, you guys are obviously phasing out Nick Nat, and it just felt like he was going to come across and he was going to be absolutely the number one ruck, which I'd imagine is what he was hoping to do. Like, you know, moving away from being under Max Gawn. I mean, no one's going to be ahead of Max Gawn. I mean, it's only one Max Gawn. So for him to move across, to come back home, I thought, honestly, he would have been a great fit for you guys. You're obviously looking to rebuild. You've culled a lot of players. None of these guys down there are particularly old. They're all like within that 24 to 26-year-old bracket, each of these players, but not too many of them were staking consistent claims to best 22. So I just felt like, you know, with how aggressive you're going to be with your list, looking for youth, looking to grow it all together, I honestly thought that out of you guys and Freo, that Luke Jackson should have come across to you. But if you've got Tim English in your sights, then I'm all aboard fading Luke Jackson, because Tim English is a veteran ass.
Yeah, I'd imagine we'll have a crack. It's a bit of a weird one that we've just got Matthew Flynn. It'd be weird to also then go for Tim English when Bailey Williams has just had a great year. But I suppose that will all play out. But it's an interesting thing you point out with the delisted players there, a lot of them in that mid-tier age thing. And that, as much as anything, is a really good symptom of what the problem has been at West Coast, where a lot of those players respectfully are like failed players that just couldn't, in that age bracket, take us to the next level. And that's probably what's left us exposed right now. You know, we got good aging veterans, but they never play. And then we had a bunch of role players in that middle age bracket. We tried to transplant in a few. You know, Zach Langdon was another one. SPS is one player listed there. Didn't work out. Witherden is one that's probably, you know, borderline at this point. And then some talented youth. So I think that graphic does indicate exactly what the issue is with the West Coast. There's not too many veterans. We did have retirements, but there's a lot of players in that same age bracket.
Yeah, it definitely feels like you guys, at period of time there, similar to what happened with the Gold Coast, right? You were a team that was looking for people, and you were happy to take on maybe some delisted players or those fringe players from some clubs. We talked about Langdon, obviously SPS, who I messaged you on Instagram before this video. I'm like, did SPS get delisted? I don't even remember this guy being a player. I mean, he just didn't feature in the preseason game. So, yeah, it kind of spoke a lot for that. And obviously, with your rebuild, trying to eliminate those players, the ones that can't compete, and bring in some that can.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand why we did this strategy. So the other factor is, the elephant in the room is, we did go for Tim Kelly and therefore traded out of 2 drafts, but we actually went 3 without taking a first round pick. So our response to that was to try and transplant in a few mature role players. And I respect that strategy. We had a problem building. We tried to get players in to fill that gap. The problem with it was that those specific players that I mentioned, they could all go fine in a good team. But when there is no, there's no meat, they can't be the potatoes, if that makes sense. Like they can't be the role players in a team with no substance. So I think that's ultimately what happened.
Yeah, it's like 12 Jared Pollacks and then no one to give Jared Pollock the ball.
Exactly, yeah.
You said you didn't realize, you don't remember SPS as a player. I remember every time I see him on my screen, I'm like, who is that moron with that ridiculous haircut? Every time I'd be like, of course it's SPS. If he put as much effort into his game as he did his hair, mate, he could have won a Brownlow for all we know. But moving past that, we're going to move to people, though, that you've moved those guys out, the SPSs of the world, the Roosters looking type operators, and we're looking to get some actual guns into the side. You hadn't used the first round pick for 3 years. So what better way to change that around with going for just number 1? So we make up for the last 3 years of no first round pick to just going for the number 1 overall pick. Obviously, we had some discussion in relation to what trades were available to you guys to trade away Harley Reid, who was, I think, touted by everybody from 2022. It wasn't even 2023 yet, and everyone was talking about, especially Cal Toomey. I remember, keep an eye on Harley Reid. Keep an eye on Harley Reid. He's like if Luke Hodge and Dusty Martin had a baby, it's him. And when you hear stuff like that, it's like, holy crap! I can't unthink that now anymore. But also, gee, this guy is an incredible talent.
Yeah, I do remember footage in 2022 of him playing deep forward, and I'm actually spacing on who the player was. I'm pretty sure it's a red-headed key defender from Essendon, actually. So you'd know who it is.
Oh, Rhett Montgomery.
No. No, like it's in. He got drafted to Essendon last year.
Lewis Hayes. If not Lewis.
Yes, Hayes. It was Lewis Hayes. Thank you. That was bugging me. He's playing on him, and Harley Reid's a year younger and like several inches shorter, and he's playing one-on-one with him. He takes two massive like one-on-one contested marks on this kid, and I was like, wow. And then it's just sort of ballooned from there, and he's played every position on the ground and did it with great aplomb, as it were. So very excited to have him, and he's going to be a best 22 player for sure.
Has the WA media gone a bit crazy with all the articles and everything, or do you feel like it's justified? If I was in Melbourne and that happened, I'd be like, cool, I wish I wasn't in Melbourne. I suppose like you're a bit safe not being in Perth at the moment, kind of just seeing everything from afar.
Yeah, I mean, because I consume all of my media through my laptop anyway, it's kind of like I'm in Perth. So like I see West Australian articles posted, and it's way over the top. It's way over the top. And I don't think it comes from a place of them loving Harley Reid. I think it's coming from a place of driving clicks and engagement, and it's working for them. You'll see certain players, not just Harley Reid, but certain players like Nick Nat was probably his predecessor, Ben Cousins before that. Like there's a poster boy and they're slaughtering this kid. And I'm not saying that they have devious intentions, but I don't think they have anyone else's best interest at heart in posting them all over their social media. And it's getting ridiculous. Like there was an anecdote from a training report yesterday. Harley rolled his ankle and he's fine. He got up and kept playing. But apparently, like as he was getting treatment, somebody said they saw like 3 cameramen like lugging their cameras across the field just to try and get a good shot. Like it's sounding like very Hollywood now. Yeah. So I think it is embarrassing, and I'd like to say they need to cut it out, but we both know that's not going to happen.
Do you feel like there's a little bit of bragging rights? Obviously, we've talked a little bit today about the Freo and West Coast kind of 50-50. Do you feel like it's a little bit like, cool, we've got this new shiny thing, Freo doesn't have it, so let's publicise them as much as we can and, stuff the other Perth-based team?
I mean, from our perspective, I think we are pretty limited on our Harley Reid propaganda. Like from a West Coast perspective, it's all about the West Australian, and I just think their motivation clearly comes from engagement. Now, in Perth, there's no doubt there's a lot more West Coast fans than Fremantle fans. Not massively disproportionate, but I think membership numbers are close to 2 to 1, if not maybe a little bit less than that. But as a result, they are getting their feedback from clicks and engagement. So I'd imagine that dictates what they put. It's sort of like if we're content creators. I know that my Collingwood videos, I only discovered that recently. If I make a Collingwood video, they will perform better. So I'm not going to have the response of just making Collingwood content all the time, but that's essentially what they're doing. And Fremantle's definitely copped a raw deal in the West Australian previously. I think I posted on a video recently. There's a back page of the West Australian the night after Nat Fyfe won his Brownlow medal, the 2019 version. And Nat Fyfe gets less than a third of the page. And the biggest story was the Willie Rioli Asada scandal, which was a big story, but like that was the day after the Brownlow. So they just do whatever the hell they want, and they cop the criticism, and then they just keep going. So yeah,
I don't know. For me, I feel like at this point, if someone comes and tells me I want to talk about Harley Reid, and I start laughing, what, you serious again? Like you don't get sick and tired of talking about the same kid over and over again. I'd imagine that he, more than anyone, is absolutely just over it. Sort of similar to Luke Jackson last year, who copped a lot of flack. It's not his. He didn't ask for the fame yet. All right, he got himself a big contract. Well, that's because Fremantle deemed him worth it. That's fine. It wasn't like he was playing particularly bad either. But like, sort of having fame. I suppose now we're starting to slowly see that it can, especially out west. I don't know, maybe here in Victoria, because it's such a footy bubble and there's so many different news outlets and so many different teams and so many different players, that it becomes really hard to focus in on one particular player and team all the time. But over there in WA, due to just how focused it is on only these two teams and these particular players, it's just like all of a sudden it can get a little toxic, unfortunately, and something needs to give, I suppose. Need to be able to give the players their space, but it doesn't look like the AFL is willing to do that. When with this new collective bargaining agreement, the media has got more access to the players than ever before. So it's unlikely that we're going to see an improvement on that front, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. And the impact that, overhyping a player has, it's not even just like his mental well-being, especially when it's positive stories, right? But it's what it essentially does is make people resent and hate the player getting hyped up. So a good example is, to use a West Australian example, is Nick Naitanui. Nick Naitanui copped more criticism and unjustified hate, maybe just in WA, but I think everywhere as well, in terms of like the overrated, overhyped tag. And yet Nick Naitanui had a very respectable career. He won 3 All-Australian jumpers, which I think only Cox and Sanderlands in the modern era have actually reached or bettered or something like that. So a very respectable career, and he's done that around multiple ACLs. Yet the average person will say, nah, overrated. Well, maybe not the average person, but in WA, Freo fans, like that will be the go-to. And it's directly a product of how much he was inflated in the media, which ultimately just led to people hating him. So I foresee this happening with Harley Reid. I'm getting comments already after the preseason game saying, oh, like, he's not very good, blah, blah, blah. A little bit more articulate than that, but like, come on, it's nobody, no other draftee is copying this right now.
Exactly.
Definitely true.
Just a
moving
down,
down,
guy. Come the farm. First hit out against AFL. He's cramped up. Well, so did Kitty Coleman yesterday. Freaking, in that Brisbane game against Gold Coast. Oh, right, Kitty Coleman off. He's been in there multiple years. He shouldn't be cramping. Like, piss off, guys. Give the kid a break. Bloody hell.
Yeah.
Moving down the list, how excited are you about Archer Reid? Question 1. And how annoyed are you going to be trying to tell people that Harley Reid and Archer Reid aren't brothers for the next 10 years?
I think it'd be fun to just perpetuate that lie and see if people believe it. How excited? I'm kind of, again, a little bit not indifferent. That sounds really disrespectful, but I didn't actually expect us to call out his name, so I didn't really put much time into him pre-draft. I do think on the plus side, he does bring to our list, it does fill a gap as a forward ruck. Like 203 centimeters, assuming he grows, he's going to be like the second or third tallest Eagle ever. So, by default, he brings something different to our list, and quite athletic, high upside. Again, I'm willing to be patient with these prospective, like 18-year-old bean poles. You got to have no expectations, but his highlights package looks good.
Yeah, he's related to our Zach Reid, actually. So I was sort of hoping. I'm not sure if they're cousins or something, but I was
I think
a
they're
little
brothers.
bit. Oh, they are brothers. All right, so there you go. Brothers with Zach Reid, not Harley Reid, different Reid. So, but I was hoping he would come to us.
You guys can use that when you try and poach Harley Reid from West Coast in a couple of years. Be like, come back and play with your brother. You both the Reids, and then people get them mixed up, and that's it, right?
It's all right. We don't have the Doro anymore. We've got people who actually do their homework and not do some sort of rookie mistake. Don't you worry, Big J. We'll be coming out for Dersma because we've got his brother at Essendon. So you got to watch out for your little brother there, mate. Clay Hall, he looked to be doing some good stuff in this preseason as another midfielder. Unfortunately, he had a soft tissue injury himself, but someone that you're going to look forward to. I really haven't heard much about Harvey Johnston myself, and I don't know too much about him, but he's at pick 49, so I'd imagine that isn't too much expectation on him. Just take your time and develop, young man.
Yeah, he seems like a ripper kid. I'm not going to lie, I don't know a whole heap about him, just simply because there's not a lot of footage out there. Like, we see some close-up footage of him, like evading a tackler, nice, hits a target. But what I've heard about him is really good. He's got really good skills and evasiveness, again, attributes that we lack. He's just really skinny. So, again, I think it's just like, have a good year in the waffle, and then maybe we'll see him in 25.
One who I'm really excited about, more of a super coach kind of background, but Colin Livingston. He's just come in, being drafted. I think, was he an overage player? And kind of him coming in, playing the preseason game and lining up alongside BJ Williams. Do you think he's going to play early?
I think he's 18. He just doesn't look it. He just looks like more developed than some of the players that have been there for years. He was Cat B rookie through our academy. Yeah, so I actually made a video before that game, and I said there were 6 Eagles that could debut this year and 3 that I'll rule out. And Cohen Livingston was like the first one I ruled out. And then we saw him in action, and I was like, wow, like, look, I don't really want to see him at AFL level this year, respectfully, because that means we've had some sort of crisis again. But he held his own very well. He really did. And, kicked a nice set shot too and exceeded my expectations. I think in contrast to some of the other younger tall types we've got, he is a competitor and he's pretty physically built already. And if we chucked him in the AFL, again, it's not ideal, but he could potentially hold his own better than some. So, yeah, fingers crossed he turns out to be a gem.
He had a beautiful set shot.
He's got a bit of the Logan McDonald's going on. Looks a lot older than what he is.
Yes,
yeah,
true.
You guys couldn't kick a goal to save your life in that pracky game against Fremantle. You were so inaccurate. In comes the big man, lined up, kicks the goal. Everyone gets around him. You hear in the crowd, his family's going bananas. So, no, I have fingers crossed for him. And I personally also really liked Rowlandson's game. I thought he was really good. I don't know. I sort of got almost like Noah Long vibes from him. The way he would hit the ball at pace, and he seemed to have some ticker about him. I liked his game.
Yeah, I think your Long comparison is a good one, and I think he's quite a busy pressure player as well. Like, I can't remember which Freo player it was, but a much bigger Fremantle player. I'm pretty sure Rawlinson was drafted at 67 kilos. Not that we're allowed to know that anymore. But he wrapped up some big Fremantle player in the middle of the ground. It might have been Chapman or something, holding the ball. And he's like 177 centimeters, and he ended up with 8 tackles. So that by far and away exceeded anything I expected from Rawlinson. I do think he's a little bit too raw, to use a pun. But, if we see him later in the end of the year, I wouldn't be shocked. He looks like a bit of a pocket rocket.
Yeah, someone to take over, like Willie Rioli being out, and then I'm not sure what's happening with Luke Ryan as well. Obviously, we were talking about hamstrings before, so could come in and kind of fill a role in that small forward spot for you. Yeah,
Ryan has done a hamstring again, so he's going to miss the first month. I think there's still, I think he'd still be behind Long. Cripps is fit now, and Brockman, I'd imagine he's well and truly starts behind those guys. But I suppose with Ryan out, it's not that far away, unfortunately.
Yeah. Honestly, I love Noah Long. Because we watched these games in the preseason, we're doing some wrap up, and I loved his game. I actually had him in my SUPERCOACH team on the bench last year. He was wonderful. So I did have a bit of a soft spot for him coming into this game, but you don't need to have any sort of affiliation to him to sort of respect the way he's going about it. I was a bit nervous for him when he sort of was limping off the field at halftime after he kicked someone in the process of kicking the ball. Because I honestly thought he was arguably your best on ground come halftime. He doesn't have a lot of the pill, but every time that he did get it, he just would do something with it. Something would happen. He'd create something out of nothing from the chaos on a wing or a high half forward, and all of a sudden you see him emerge with the football, zigzag, inside 50s. I loved Long's game.
Mate, I think you just echoed a lot of what Eagles fans say about him. I think if anyone didn't watch our games and looked at the stat sheet, you would never imagine that Noah Long is a good player. Looked on stats, he's not a particularly high volume player. That being said, he was an underdeveloped 18-year-old. So, but he's got a bit of the King Midas about him. Everything he touches turns into an opportunity where the ball's in a better place than when it started. And that sounds really basic, but he does it consistently and was doing that from his second game. So, yeah, very excited about what Noah Long can do. And I think, honestly, he could be a future captain.
Big call. Love to hear it. Because we are making some predictions for his future. This is a perfect segue. I got to say.
Joe and his segues. You pick anything up from this, Jesse. You pick anything up from this, it's Joe loves his segues. And as you see, he does pretty good with them.
They are a great way to get around.
Yes, indeed. I was about to say, I look down sometimes to see if I have wheels. How much of it sometimes. But predictions for 2024. Are we going to see a rise from the Eagles? Are you going to be 18th, 17th? Do you see someone else dropping really hard, or do you see yourselves now with Obviously, a bit more rejuvenation. Obviously, you could have sacked, your coach last year, but there was a lot of pressure. But you backed him in, a bit like what Carlton, did with Vossi. He was under a lot of pressure. Could have been the easy route to be like, yeah, all right, fine, we'll succumb to peer pressure, to external expectations, but you backed him in. What do you reckon now? I think this club has got a clear direction. They know it's a rebuild. You've gone hard. You've delisted a bunch of people. Is it going to see you rise this year?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because I think we can still improve a lot and still finish last. So forecasting what other teams do around us is the tricky part for me. Now, I've come in full of belief that we should improve, and I do think that is a very logical argument. If you just assume that we don't have the same injury issues. Now, don't get me wrong, we're a bad team. Like, even if fully fit, well, not that we're ever going to see that, but, imagine, and I find myself already talking about injuries, forgive me, but I feel like I need to make this point. If Collingwood had our injuries last year, they might not have finished last, but they wouldn't have made finals, I would argue. You imagine you transplant that over, say an Essendon or a North, your boys, like it would just, rip the hell out of your team. And I think West Coast were already a bad team. So all I'm saying is if we get rid of those injuries or minimize the effect of them, then we should at least be at a point where we can stay competitive for longer and execute on a game style and actually see some players develop, which, by default is a lot better than last year. So I picked us to finish 17th. I think that was largely based on North's younger list. It's not necessarily something I'm married to, but I will back my boys in to avoid the wooden spoon. I will back them in to avoid the finals. And fingers crossed they prove me right.
Yeah. I guess it's a little bit, speaking about North Melbourne, another segue, obviously. But we saw between 2022 and 2023 more of a differential loss between the games we won and the games we lost, and bringing our percentage up a little bit. Yep. If that happened with West Coast, let's say you were on 50% and then jumped up to like 70%, you'd be very, very happy with that, with a young team that's obviously got a lot of injuries. If that was like your outcome for the year, obviously getting another early draft pick, you'd be pretty happy, right?
I would, yes. I'm not actually super concerned about winning another spoon. I think that shows how demoralized last year got me. So I'm just like, yeah, all right, another spoon, whatever. It is all about premierships. So yes, you're right. It's the reduction of those horrific losses where we just like people are just talking about how pathetic it is. There was a number of those last year, at least 5. So yeah, getting those right. And then the second element I'll add to that is, yes, we'd like to be more competitive, but there would be some other nuanced things I'd be looking for. Like I'd like to have made sure that, Jinby's played 20 games and Hoff and all these guys are at least involved. They don't necessarily have to be driving that improvement yet, but if they're involved and getting that experience, that is another important KPI for us, I would say.
Who comes in and probably takes Jack Darling's spot alongside, Oscar Allen? Who's the player that comes in and does that?
So do you mean like next year? Because he should be
fit for 2024. Like obviously Darling's on his last legs, and then someone's got to come in, and you guys love the 2-prong forward line. Who's your prediction to kind of take that spot?
It's a good question. I think we might just roll with an unconventional key forward line because we've got Waterman and Marek as 2 kind of undersized key forwards that are kind of third talls, but we don't really know if Marek's going to develop into a key forward, or is he a bit more of a Gunston, or is he a bit more of a high half forward? Like that still remains to be seen. But, Bailey Williams is planning to have, or is expected to have more forward presence. So he's the 201 centimeter guy in there, plus Oscar Allen. Could we go with another Waterman-Marek combo to support that? So what does that look like? We don't really have a clear answer. In terms of actual key forwards past that, it's Archer Reed. So longer term, he might be the man, but I could see this little stopgap period where we're going Waterman, Allen, Marek, supported by Bailey Williams.
I mean, if Marek's 196 centimeters, he's not exactly a small key forward, is he?
No, you're right. Super skinny, kind of better on the lead and up the ground and delivering the ball inside 50. He's kind of an interesting mix of all these attributes. But that doesn't mean he couldn't develop into a genuine he won't be a power forward or anything like that, but players do change. Sometimes running defenders become key backs. So I wouldn't put a limit on him, but it's one to watch for sure.
I definitely can understand where you're coming from when you say you can foresee improvement, but at the same time finishing last on the ladder. Because I know I've spoken with Big J a lot last year, you know, by virtue of the fact that we have the channel together. But we speak a lot off air in terms of, Captain Obvious right here. But we've spoken a lot in terms of, the overall competition has absolutely improved. The AFL in total, I think across the league, has absolutely gone to another level of competitiveness where we're at a point where the bottom four, the top of the bottom four, Gold Coast Suns, were one win away from like 12th on the ladder, for example. You know what I mean? Like it's a really interesting situation that we find ourselves in the AFL. Hawthorn, who were third last, they've beat Collingwood, they beat Brisbane. Like we're at a stage where you guys should have beat us. North should have beaten Sydney, if not for the interchange thing. Like even the bottom four are capable of challenging the top eight on any particular day. And so I can completely understand where you're coming from when you say we might finish last, but there will still be improvement. And I think that's just reflective overall of where we find ourselves in the AFL. For you, a successful season might just genuinely be you get your young players lasting through the year, experience, you have an identifiable game plan with these new youngsters. They've bought into the culture. You got a couple of senior experienced players make it all the way to the end. And even if it is a bottom of the table finish, I can still expect that you guys will be taking a lot of positives because you're not trying to challenge for the flag this year. It's all about preparing for the next one. And so I think obviously you can sort of go in and really have the mindset of there's only one way to go and that's up. It might not necessarily be this year, but as you mentioned, there's a lot of different little ups along the way, little wins that you can take along the way that can forecast when the next premiership is.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I think I agree with absolutely everything there. I think West Coast are kind of a unique club in the sense that we have been able to experience wonderful, memories with premierships and stuff like that. But we also fall harder than just about any other team. Like between the Ben Cousins saga to what's happening now, I've seen the entire full spectrum of footy, and I am bracing. Like I can do with another. Well, not I don't want it, but like I can cope with another rebuild fine. But what I can't really do again is another year where, well, if the injuries get bad again for a start, that in itself is demoralising. But we can't deal with these 500-point losses, 30-goal loss to Sydney. That's just got to stop. But so anything on building a base on top of that is fine.
Yeah. I mean, you guys go hard or go home. I feel like it's West Coast. Like you just full send really it.
Go home.
Yeah, and then you really go home. It's either premiership or wooden spoon. Like there's no middle ground. But to be honest, if I'm an Essendon supporter and I've been stuck in the middle for a long time, just you're in that no man's land, just stuck there, trying to find this little thing to get you up top, but not going about it the right way, and then you just get stuck stagnant, meandering. I know King likes to use that word on SCN today, and it's very, very fitting. It is. Like it's classic Essendon, middle of the rung, no man's land, not pushing for success, but at the same time not bottoming out, making the hard list calls to overturn it. I'd much rather be in a position where, yes, you hit hard your list, but it's the right calls, gone about the right way because you've got the flag in your sights. And it's not just about winning a participation award and looking all right. It's about genuinely contending. And I'd much rather be like a West Coast Eagle fan when you guys go about it hard, get to a final, grand final, back-to-back, you on the Swans, you win a couple, you beat Collingwood, you break their hearts, which to me is almost as good as Essendon winning a final. And then you come back down and you just do it again. You know what I mean? Like there's always something happening and development is always there.
Yeah, mate, I agree. I do, in theory, rather have the ups and the downs. I guess the only thing about that is when you're having the down, you're not 100% sure the up's coming back. So there's all these feelings. But I do believe, I think we've proven in the past we can get out of these messes that we find ourselves in. And we've made some really strong off-field moves, in my opinion. And yeah, I have belief. That's all we can have at this point.
It's the hope that kills. But on that note, I'm just kidding. We're not gonna end it there. Absolutely, it was a wonderful chat. Honestly, like we don't, outside of media pundits talking about West Coast Eagles, don't really have any fans and friends myself. We do have some people who are subscribed to the channel, are always very happy to talk about their Eagles, and we love to hear from them, but it's not too much of a presence outside of like media bashing. Oh, West Coast, yeah, they're shit again, blah, blah, blah. But like, it's always refreshing to obviously talk to someone who's very passionate about them, in the know. And it was a wonderful episode today. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Boys, thank you so much for having me. For the record as well, you guys did a wonderful job of interviewing me about a team that you don't follow. So mad respect. You guys have done a great job, got a great show. And yeah, I'd be happy to come on anytime. So thank you very much for having me.
Hey, you're welcome anytime. I know the time difference is a bit tricky, but if it's like 12 hours, it's our nighttime and your daytime or your morning. So it kind of figures out that way.
Yeah, I started doing collabs a lot more in the last 3 or 4 months. And I think it's 11 to Melbourne. So yeah, it's fine. Like, this is my job, so I can get up anytime and whatever.
Yeah, we've obviously mentioned your channels a couple of times here now during this video, but please tell us, Jesse, for all of those poor miserable souls living under a rock who don't know where to find you, please tell them where they can see where you upload next.
Yeah, so I have True Footy. That's a general AFL channel. Upload pretty much daily at the moment. And for Eagles fans, I have True Eagle, which is where I get a little bit more Eagles nuffy for you. I do have other socials. To be honest, I don't really post on them much. I don't really care if people follow them, but YouTube is where it's at. So True Footy and True Eagle.
Awesome. We'll have to get you on the Twitter. It'll be a good one.
I know. I feel like I'm missing out with Twitter, but I just can't do it.
Yeah, fair enough. Make sure, guys, you head on over to True Footy and True Eagle. Chuck them both a subscription because, as you can tell, if you guys enjoyed and you're watching 51 minutes in, still listening to us talk to Jesse about the Eagles, it means you like this stuff and you don't care if you don't barrack for the Eagles. You will consume anything football related, and that means True Eagle is also on the cards for you guys as well. So make sure you head on, subscribe to both of those channels, help this incredible man out. He is doing YouTubing football from the other side of the planet. This is incredible stuff. You got to support him, guys, honestly.
Thanks, mate.
All right, guys. Before we head off, you obviously know what we've got. We've got our SuperCoach League as well. Jump on that if you haven't already. And an AFL tipping competition where you guys can win an AFL voucher.
Yes, that's correct. I felt like reciprocating that awkward pause from you, Big J. But you know what? I'm going to take the high road here, and I'm not going to do that. Classic North fan you are. Make sure you hit that notification bell, guys, to make sure you don't miss out on any of the videos that we are pumping out this preseason and during the season proper, because it doesn't stop. We are going to be reviewing the games, all the preseason games, the round zero games, going over it with a fine comb, toothbrush, any sort of tweezers, any sort of apparatus that you use to groom yourselves. We will be going over all the games in that much detail. So make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, please.
If you haven't already, smash that like button and subscribe to True Footy too.
I did say that before, but anyway,
that's true.
Guys,
we got to say it twice. We've got the special guest on.
Thank you so much, Jesse. Much love once again. Your socials and everything will be in the comments down below, because all of us here on the channel and all of our friends do the hard work so that you guys do not have to. We'll see you all in the next one.